Fall Out Boy are back, and I am thoroughly disappointed. So Much For Stardust, the band's 8th album and first in 5 years, was released in March 2023, receiving largely positive reviews and high levels of enthusiasm from the public. It was promised to be everything fans have wanted from Fall Out Boy for years, a return to their more guitar-driven, rock-heavy sound after 2018's electro-pop mania. I was initially excited by this prospect. After all, my personal favourite Fall Out Boy records are the heavier ones, their earlier stuff, but I was also wary, as I have been burned by a promised return to our roots before see the Cribs 24/7 rockstar shit. And my predictions turned out largely correct, as I was left feeling very dissatisfied by So Much For Stardust. In fact, the record made very little impression on me at all. But few seem to share my opinion, as I watched a lot of fans around me really celebrate the record, and so it took me quite a while to crystallise why I find So Much For Stardust so painfully mediocre. Let me start by saying that people like music for different reasons. You might love Fall Out Boy for totally different reasons to me, and you might love this new record, and you might hate all my opinions about it, and that's okay, that's fair enough. I want to talk about and explore why I like Fall Out Boy, why the new record didn't really live up to my expectations, and also why Take This To Your Grave is probably always going to be my favourite Fall Out Boy album. And if they don't sound linked, they are. But let's start with So Much For Stardust. It's a pop rock record with all songs featuring the kind of classic Fall Out Boy lineup, but they also have like quite a lot of orchestral sounds on this, and orchestra featuring on several of the tracks. In this way, the record feels similar to Folie à Deux, their 2009 album, and it also has this kind of like big feeling and like epic feeling in quite a lot of the songs. However, not one song from the record stuck with me after my initial listen, and even on re-listens, there are only a couple that have managed to lodge themselves in my brain in any way, and they're hanging on by a thread, to be honest with you. In contrast, my favourite Fall Out Boy album is their 2003 debut studio album, Take This To Your Grave. I'm not going to spend much time talking about the way that Fall Out Boy's sound has changed since this record, especially because I don't want to fall into like old arguments about the inevitable softening of Fall Out Boy and of other bands' sounds as they grow in popularity. It's also not really important to the core of my argument here. Fall Out Boy's changing musical sound has never been a problem for me personally, and I've liked the way they've experimented with different sounds over their career. But what you need to know, if you're not familiar with Take This To Your Grave, is that it's a pop-punk record featuring the potent marriage of clean production and melodic songs with distorted guitars and heavy feeling that has always made pop-punk so appealing to me and to a lot of other people. I also want to be clear that this isn't a nostalgia thing. Like, I was 15 when I started listening to Fall Out Boy seriously, which was around the time that American Beauty, American Psycho came out. So I'm really too young to associate any record before that time with like any kind of like personal nostalgia for a time. And I still really like American Beauty, American Psycho. I don't prescribe to the cliched idea that bands are always better before they have resources, like before they get big and before they sell out. My favourite Fall Out Boy albums and songs include records from pre and post their hiatus in 2009 to 2012. Even with Mania, there were still songs that I liked on that record, even if I don't think it's their strongest by a long shot. In general, I really admire Fall Out Boy's ability to grow and change as a band while still staying a collaborative unit and keeping their group cohesion and chemistry. There aren't many bands who have been around more than 20 years and achieved the level of worldwide popularity that they have who have managed to keep their core members so like strong like that, and I really admire them for that. So one of the things I've always liked about Take This To Your Grave is that it's the only Fall Out Boy record where both bassist Pete Wentz and singer Patrick Stump wrote lyrics. The only album they ever recorded before they kind of settled on their roles of lyricist and composer respectively, which they've kept in steadfastly until this day. In a recent clip I watched with Sirius FM, Patrick Stump says that he feels iffy about this period in which he wrote some of the lyrics because he doesn't feel like it's his strong point creatively. Stump and Wentz allegedly fought a lot over the lyrics on Take This To Your Grave, perhaps contributing to Stump's ambivalence towards it on the album. But I personally always felt that the album is a lot better for having two lyricists on it. We'll come back to the lyrical content of it in a bit, but I want to talk first about So Much for Stardust and the main problems with the lyrics on it, because I think it's the lyrics that are what make it so forgettable. The first problem with the lyrics on it is that they are way too vague and not very specific. For the most part, So Much for Stardust kind of avoids mentioning many specific experiences or situations. The only thing it really references is feelings, but it does so quite a lot of time in this quite annoyingly direct way, so that Fall Out Boy don't actually create the feeling that they're talking about. It all feels quite casual and superficial, and when there are effective metaphors and images, they're not very fleshed out, so they don't feel very relevant. In this way, the songs don't really stick in your head, and they feel like they could have been written by anyone, and also at any point. Like, they don't feel like, musically they feel quite like Fall Out Boy songs, but lyrically they don't really feel like Fall Out Boy songs. There's nothing specific about them at all. It kind of feels like Fall Out Boy are trying to make these like sing-along anthems, and so they're going for a very universal lyrical approach because of this, but it means they've kind of lost any interesting angle or also any kind of like strong emotional intent. The second issue I have with the lyrics is that some of the lyrics are emo cliches, and Fall Out Boy end up sounding a bit like a sad rip-off of themselves. Every song has at least one of these kind of cringy lines that are really prevalent in like a lot of Machine Gun Kelly songs, for example, where they're like way too direct and obvious. But the final and biggest problem with the lyrics is a problem that has plagued Fall Out Boy since the beginning, and especially since Pete Wentz started writing all the lyrics by himself. And that's a lack of cohesion within the songs lyrically. While there are some really good lyrics and lines still present on this album, it's the placement of lyrics next to each other that don't follow from each other at all and seem to be in no way related. On earlier albums it definitely happened, it's been happening throughout their career, but it used to be like, I don't know, 2-3 times on the album and it'll just give me a laugh, like the particularly heinous Tears on Ice line from Sophomore Slump or Comeback of the Year, which is on their second album, From Under the Cork Tray. Like that always made me laugh. Me and my brother used to laugh about it when we were younger, because it just has such a whiplash between the like quite well written and sensitive rest of the chorus and then this line, take your tears, put them on ice, which is a completely different thought inserted in the middle of it. It's also like, it's not a good line. Is what the hell does it mean? What like, is he serving his tears up to people to drink? Is it meant to be a metaphor for like emotional manipulation? If so, it's like not developed at all. It's just like plopped in there. Anyway, on So Much for Stardust, every song has this problem. Every song has this lyrical whiplash, which is part of what leaves the song feeling like they're not about anything. You know, you have this whiplash between like fairly meaningless lines or gestures, these kind of old overused cliches, like songwriting cliches, and then these metaphors that aren't fleshed out at all. It feels a bit like Fall Out Boy are focusing on writing good 1 or 2 liners than on like making cohesive, meaningful, or interesting full songs. I would struggle to tell you what most of the songs on So Much for Stardust are actually about, other than like a feeling, I guess, like there's a general like self-reflectiveness on the album, and like there's a couple of the better songs I could tell you a bit, like Flu Game being about unrequited love. But this is also backed up by, if you take a glance at the Genius page for all of the songs on this album, they rarely say anything about the subject of the songs. Most of the comments that come from the band are just things they've said in interviews about the way things were recorded or how they sound musically. There's not really any content about what the songs are about or what they mean or the inspiration lyrically for them. For a band whose career has been built on their image of being like quite meaningful and emotional, I think we expect a bit more. And this isn't just me being like a bitter elder emo or something. I'm definitely not old enough to have the title of elder emo. The album itself, the tone of the album itself is one that takes itself very seriously. If it was meant to be fun and light, I would care a lot less about the lyrics and the cohesion of the songs. But it sounds like Fall Out Boy are trying very hard to make songs that would be considered sing-along anthems, something that admittedly they are very good at and they're very known for. Honestly, I would love to see them lean a bit more into the, like, having fun with it. I would enjoy Fall Out Boy and whether like leaning into the more nonsensical or like silly lyrics and having fun with it. But they're not, and that's why you have this kind of dissonance between the tone and the music of it and then what some of the lyrics actually are. I think this album sounds quite at home at, in the current emo revival, where like a lot of these new acts are repeating kind of like emo cliches that they heard growing up with newer sound and fresher production than on So Much For Stardust, which honestly I think the production on this sounds quite dated and is quite flat and quite uninteresting. And honestly, a lot of these newer acts are also writing more well-written songs and bringing more of a fresh lyrical take that feels more relevant and is missing on So Much For Stardust. You know, a lot of these new emo acts are writing about things like, you know, being addicted to your phone or online dating on dating apps and how shit it is. You know, stuff that is kind of like relevant and that people will connect to much more specifically. The only song on So Much For Stardust that features any lyrics that place it as having been released in 2023 versus like 2007 is What a Time to Be Alive, which references the COVID pandemic. But still, it doesn't really say anything about it. It's kind of like, oh yeah, we all went through the pandemic together. It doesn't say anything about the pandemic at all or about their experiences in the pandemic. In contrast, the lyrics on Take This To Your Grave, which, yes, are sometimes messy, sometimes sound like a band still finding themselves, but they're much easier to connect to and much more emotionally meaningful. I think a large part of this is because these songwriting problems that Pete Wentz has, that I've talked about, are just not as present. While the subject matter on Take This To Your Grave is not original, it's an album about teenage angst, heartbreak, frustration. I could definitely tell you what every single song is about, and each song has a distinct feeling, as well as having fairly solid lyrical and musical song structures. The subject matter isn't groundbreaking or new, but at least the songs are about something. Dead on Arrival is a memorable metaphor for unrequited love, with the singer hoping that he'll be the song you grow to like that never sticks at first. Grenade Jumper is like a fan shout-out song to their alleged only fan at the time, which manages to be both tongue-in-cheek because they don't have any fans and also very wholesome. Calm Before the Storm is like one of my personal favourite Fall Out Boy songs. I think it's really well written. It has this kind of, you know, it builds up to this kind of climax that really, really pays off and is very powerful. Saturday is a great song about the feeling of being young and having loads of energy but having nowhere to expend it, and then, you know, feeling like your future's kind of bleak and just holding on to that hope of that one time that you get to go out with your friends and do stuff, you know. Those are just a few of the songs I love off that record. I honestly don't think there's a bad song on that album, although there are definitely some that really stick with you the first time round and a couple that come out more with re-listens. The truth is that many of the best songs on Take This To Your Grave are songs where Stump had a large part in the writing, including Saturday and Grand Theft Autumn. They're both songs that him and Pete thought about a lot. I don't want anyone to misconstrue me as saying that I want Fall Out Boy to go back to a time where they were fighting over lyrics and unhappy with the band dynamic. They have lasted this long precisely because they have all agreed and kept to the roles established within the band. But Pete Wentz's lyrics have grown into his worst writing flaws over the last 20 years. And now on this record, no one is co-writing or challenging them, where on previous albums, Fall Out Boy have brought in outside songwriters, so Patrick Stump wasn't involved with songwriting, but they had other people come in. So Much For Stardust is written exclusively by the band, and this is not a good thing because it means the lyrics are written exclusively by Pete Wentz. Whether or not you like the very poppy sound of American Beauty, American Psycho, or Save Rock and Roll, the songs are objectively tighter and better written pop songs than on this new album, likely due to the outside influence of other songwriters and other kind of industry professionals helping to develop the songs. Maybe my frustration with So Much For Stardust is about something bigger. I feel like this album is hailing the real death of emo and the reason why emo to some extent died. the truth is, there are only so many songs you can write that basically say, I'm sad, without saying anything more interesting or specific or more colourful. I want to hear music about things that have actually happened to people and specifically talk about how they feel and what they've been through, whether it's, you know, about that one relationship that didn't work out, or the friend that was always there for you, or, you know, hating your parents. It doesn't need to be new subject matter, it just needs to be, you know, actually talking about it, and it needs to have some heart. People that were in their late 30s, early 40s, some of them have kids, like, give me some genuine songs about fatherhood, or growing older, or having a midlife crisis, or anything. I don't care, just give me a song about anything. In all honesty, I'd rather emo had stayed dead. Things die for a reason. That reason is so much for Stardust.